Really quite a pleasure. And again, I want to thank Jill, who volunteered to hold the phone for the entire program. But welcome, everybody. My name is Robert Haas. I am the rabbi of Congregation Mickve Israel, and I am proud to say that we are one of the oldest synagogues in America, as was mentioned. We're also not only a synagogue, but we're also a full-time museum, so we actually do both, which is well, we did both before COVID-19, which is really quite rare and amazing. We had docents who made sure that our program considered a 5-day week. So basically from Monday through Friday, from 9 to 4-ish, 10 to 4-ish, we have docents who show people around whenever they're in town. And at one point, we were the #1 ranked tourist destination in all of Georgia. Thank you, Parade Magazine. We're not sure how we got that designation, but we're very proud of it. So again, we have anywhere from 11 to 12,000 people a year who usually come on a tour here. We have probably 4,000 or 5,000 people a year who come in for services, for other functions. So we really take great pride in showing our congregation to everyone. So if you're ever in Savannah and it's on non-COVID time, come on down. We'd love to have you. Now, as for our history, it's really quite impressive, I think. We're standing, first of all, in our museum, and then we'll go down to our sanctuary. In 1733, a man named Oglethorpe founded Georgia here in Savannah. So Savannah is the first city of Georgia. That was February of 1733. In July of 1733, a boat of Jews, 41 Jews, came onto the shores and became part of this community. It was the largest immigration of Jews to America to the time. It made that, and then a few more Jews we'll talk about who came later, will make Savannah actually the largest Jewish congregation and community in the country for a very short while. So 1733, this boat arrives, and they arrive in a place where they've just founded the colony. And on this boat is we find 41 Jews. Most of them are Portuguese refugees, 2 Ashkenazic German families. The Portuguese refugees had escaped the Inquisition in Portugal because they were crypto-Jews, moved to England, didn't quite fit in. And so the oldest synagogue in Britain, Bevis Marks, sponsored their trip to the New World, where they thought they might be much more successful. So on the boat, 41 Jews, mostly Portuguese, but also the 2 German families. They arrive in Savannah at a time where no group of Jews had ever been allowed to come on to land and become full citizens without a fight, without a lot of issues. They got here and they were welcomed into the community and became full members of Georgia immediately. So we believe it's the first time, or one of the first times, a group of Jews have ever been given full rights the moment they landed here. So basically, throughout the history of this colony and then this state, Jews have always had full rights in Georgia. Now, there were a couple reasons they were given full rights. One, in the charter, Catholics were not allowed, or papists. They were not Catholics. So even though the people back in England did not really want Jews to come and move here, it was not written down anywhere. And so Oglethorpe, who was very enlightened, saw it wasn't written down and gave them full rights, gave them houses, gave them a plot of land to farm and a garden, the exact same thing as everybody else. And they were required to join the militia. That was an impressive thing because rarely were Jews allowed to be part of a militia, an army. So they were required, because Savannah was founded as a way to protect Charleston from Spanish Florida. The other reason they were given full rights was on the boat was this very prominent doctor. His name was Samuel Nunez. He was the doctor to the Grand Inquisitor of Portugal himself, may have even treated the king. His nephew was the doctor to Catherine the Great. And so when he was captured as a crypto-Jew, he was not killed because of these ties he had. So he arrived here and there was some sort of epidemic that had devastated the colony. Something was yellow fever, probably was something else. And so he came in, treated the colony, and is given credit by Oglethorpe for saving this dying colony. And so that's another reason Jews have always had full rights here. So we take great pride in being part of Georgia and being so connected. Not only are we the third oldest synagogue in America, we're the second oldest house of worship in Georgia. We're also the first synagogue in the South, and also the oldest Ashkenazic synagogue. We're going to be the only Ashkenazic synagogue in America for over 60 years, because we're founded both as an Ashkenazic and a Sephardic synagogue. 4 years later, another boat would arrive with a group of German Jews who ended up in England, and England sponsored their trip here. So again, both an Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews. We read in writings from the non-Jewish settlers talking about the Jews, and of course, they're always wondering, why are those Jews always arguing about what they can eat? So obviously, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazic Jews, some different traditions, especially for Passover, which would have happened during this time. And so when they arrived here, they brought with them 2 things that we still have. First, this. This is the first Torah scroll to come to America. The Jews who came here in 1737, and we'll go to the other side, brought with them the second Torah scroll to come to America, right here. So these are the first 2 Torah scrolls to come to America. Not only that, we believe Bevis Marks sent their oldest Torah scrolls with these 2 boats, thinking they were the least valuable, not realizing that our congregation would keep these scrolls that at that time were already probably 250 to 300 years old. So now we have 2 scrolls that both come from the 15th century. They're 2 of the oldest scrolls in the world, the 2 oldest scrolls in America. There is only 1 scroll we know of in the entire world that is considerably older than either of these 2. They're both on deer skin, which is quite amazing itself. They must have been able to domesticate deer. If you look at them, and we'll show them their amazing shape, we know they were made, they were written in North Africa, Spain, or Portugal, and they have water damage, but through all that, they are beautiful, magnificent. I think the word is magnificent. Yeah, I said it right. And they are actually in better shape, or look better than all of our scrolls. We have 5 scrolls written in the 19th century, and these 2 are much nicer than those 5. So whoever wrote them had a really great technical skill. The other thing they brought with them was over here, is the first circumcision kit to come to America right there. That was brought in 1733. What's even more incredible about these objects is we use those 2 Torah scrolls at least once a year from 1733 until about 4 years ago, when the conservator, the person who checks our scrolls, told us we shouldn't be using them anymore. So about 4 years ago, we stopped using both the Torah scrolls, and also we stopped using the circumcision kit about 4 years ago. And that's really quite amazing. We saved a lot of money. Our insurance rates went down. It was really quite an amazing thing. For those of you wondering, that was actually a joke. We did not really do that. So we're so proud to have these things in our congregation. Our babies, of course, are these 2 Torah scrolls. So 1733, the city is founded. We arrived. The Jews are very much part of the community. The second boat arrives in 1737 with the German Jews. In 1742, there was a war between Spain and England called the War of Jenkins' Ear. All of the Sephardic Jews fled Savannah because they feared if Savannah was taken by Spain, they would all be killed. Both the husbands, the wives, and then of course the children, because they had escaped illegally from the Inquisition. So all of the Sephardic Jews left, which meant we were an Ashkenazic congregation, the only one until the 1790s. And so there would be some Sephardic Jews who would move here through the years. So in 1742, we became purely an Ashkenazic synagogue after the War of Jenkins' Ear. Now, what we see here is our museum. It's an award-winning museum. Again, we've won a lot of awards, and we're one of the top places to go on TripAdvisor in Savannah. Very proud of that. But also, our docents are incredible because we have 45 or so volunteer docents, and they do their own research. And because we came here in 1733 intentionally, to start a synagogue. The two older synagogues, Rhode Island and New York, didn't do that. They were kind of accidental. We have records going back to the day we arrived. So there's a lot of people who do research here and check our archives. We have archives here. We have some of them in Cincinnati, some other places. So we take great pride in all of the research that is done. Here you see some examples of panels that were recently created. This one right here is a particularly interesting one, right? It is a map of Savannah. So if anybody's been to Savannah, you've seen this map. Savannah is the oldest city in America that has the same original plan to its city. They have squares so that in the middle of each area or so, there's some nice parkland. This is not the map you will see. If you come to Savannah, you see this map everywhere. This is a little different because this is not the 1733 map. This is the 1734 map showing where the Jews live. And that's pretty impressive because most of the times if Jews were on a list or a map, it was a bad thing. This is the opposite because it shows us that the Jews were given the same exact thing as everybody else. House, plot of land, and then farmland. It shows the names of the 17 families. As you can see from their last names, most of them for Portugals. You see De Leon, Nunez. The doctor was Samuel Nunez. And then you see the two Ashkenazic families, Sheftel and Minus. Those two families are still in our community, although they're not Sheftels anymore. They're still Sheftels, but not Sheftels in the city, but descendants of the Sheftels are still in our congregation. Descendants of the Minus family are still in Savannah, but they're no longer Jewish. So we've had members of our congregation who've always been able to trace their lineage back to the 1733 vote, which is amazing because it really predates all of the immigration patterns. Of course, the 18th century was the Sephardic, then you had the German, then you had the Eastern Europe. We kind of predate everything. And it's really incredible that we've always been a Jewish community that's been part of the larger community. So even though we're a small town, we're probably 140,000 people or so, there's probably 4,500 to 5,000 Jews in a small southern town of 140,000 people. That is pretty impressive. Right here, if you come to Savannah, you'll see a monument. That is where the original cemetery was. Now, what is a little interesting or scary, depending, or spooky about Savannah is when they built Savannah, they put all of the cemeteries right outside the city. So as the city expanded, it expanded over all of these cemeteries. And so walking around Savannah, you're actually walking around in a lot of places cemeteries, including the Jewish one, because they did not move the bodies, they left them there, so they're still there. We then built, our members of our congregation built two cemeteries. This is one of them that we're still our caretakers for. One was for just the family, and that was for the Sheftel. The other one was for any Jewish person who lived here or who was just in the area and died. They had a place to be buried. Later in the 19th century, the city would build two big, giant places to live, cemeteries, and the Jewish communities would be part of those. If you come over here, you see the panel of Mordechai Sheftel. He is one of the first two Europeans born in Savannah. He was born here in 1734, a year after or so they arrived. And he was the son of Benjamin Sheftel. He was one of the highest ranking Jews in the military. And then when the American Revolution broke out, he became the highest ranking Jew in the military. He was commissioned a general. He is the person who chose our delegate to the Second Continental Congress. At the time, it was not known that that was a big deal. It was actually considered a secondary position. The person who was given that position actually was very upset about it, but he was the one who actually sent the person to do that. He was known as the rebel-rousing Jew of Georgia. Many people looked at him as one of the great leaders of this area during the revolution. He and his son, Sheftel right here, were both captured in the Battle of Savannah. In fact, in the Battle of Savannah, it documents that when we were supposed to retreat from the English, which actually happened, we were supposed to retreat to the Jewish cemetery, which is his family cemetery. They were captured because When they got to a river and everybody was escaping over the river, his son did not know how to swim. And so both of them were captured and treated very roughly for the next several years in prison. His son actually kept his military uniform throughout his life, and his family still has his famous hat that he wore throughout his life. Over here, we have our next, what we call most impressive pieces of history. Right here in the middle, that middle one right there, that is the first letter from a president of the United States to a Jewish community. That is a letter from George Washington after we sent him a congratulatory note after he was elected in 1790. Next to it, you will see letters from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison over here. And they both sent us congratulatory notes because we didn't build our first building until 1820. We held services in people's homes, and sometimes we held it at other houses of worship. There's a letter from Robert A. Lee, a letter from Andrew Johnson, who was the president after Lincoln. We also have a wall of other presidential letters, so we probably have more presidential letters than any other synagogue. We also have letters from, again, other people such as Robert E. Lee to one of our members. They owned a apothecary, a pharmacy, and they have it alone. We have a hat. Obviously, this is the military hat from our rabbi who served in World War I. Over here, we have some other pieces to our congregation that we're so proud of. This is Herman Myers. We still have his desk. He is the first Jewish Savannah, Jewish mayor of Savannah, and very proud of him. He was very popular. We've had others through the years. We also have a picture of Monticello. Why would we have a picture of Monticello? If you don't realize, Monticello is not in Georgia. It's somewhere else in the north. I think maybe like South Carolina. So Monticello was, of course, the home of Thomas Jefferson, who was not Jewish. But this man, Commodore Levy, who was the highest ranking Jew in the military and for much of the 19th century, served in the War of 1812, served actually also in the Civil War for a while. He was a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson. So when Thomas Jefferson died bankrupt, his family was going to sell his plantation and demolish it because it had gone into ruin. Commodore Levy bought it, renovated it, left it to his nephew, because he didn't have any children, who lost it during the Civil War, sued, got it back, then renovated it again. So basically, Monticello still exists because of Commodore Levy, who was the great-grandson of Samuel Nunez, that doctor who came to Savannah. So although he was never a member here, we consider it quite impressive that his lineage comes from here. Over here, we have a Haggadah, of course, used for Passover, but this Haggadah has family notes from one of our earliest congregants from the 18th century. And so it's really quite impressive to be able to have that. We have also a Haggadah, but also a Megillah, Megillat Esther, the book of Esther. Now, some have said this may be the oldest Megillat Esther in America. Unfortunately, we cannot prove that because we've had people who've said it's 450, 600 years old even, or 150. What may have happened is that there have been pages that were added in later or substituted, so we can't say for sure this is the oldest Megillah in America. We have a very old ketubah going all the way down back to the 18th century. Now, we have to remember, America was the Wild West for Judaism for a very long time. So a lot of people getting married didn't use them because you didn't need them. The first rabbi did not move to America till the 1840s. So the years before that are called what we say the good old days. So there are no rabbis. So the fact that we had a ketubah was really quite rare. This is the ketubah of Abigail minus Sheftel, one of the most important, if not the most important women who were Jewish of the 18th century. She came here, she married, had a husband, and her husband died. But instead of getting married and giving all her wealth or needing to be taken care of, she took over her husband's business, enlarged it, and became one of the wealthiest women in America. Not only that, a very fierce woman opened one of the first bars in Savannah, was known to have pirates and people, privateers in her bar. very influential, supported the American Revolution. So if you want to, Abigail Minus Sheftel may be the most famous Savannian of that generation. Over here we have Miss Daisy, a playbill for the actual play and a photo of her. Her family actually comes from here, although she moved to Atlanta, but we still have family members here. In fact, a few years ago, I had the pleasure of officiating at her great-great-grandniece's wedding. So that was really quite amazing. Over here, one of the things Savannah's most famous for is, of course, Girl Scouts. They were founded here. Most people don't realize, though, that when Juliet Gordon Lowe founded the Girl Scouts, she picked 5 women to be the first leaders, and 3 were from our congregation. So that's right, 60% of the first Girl Scout leaders were Jewish. She was very good friends with the Jewish community. This is her certificate from one of those first 5. Her daughter died only 3 years ago at the age of 101 and may have been the oldest Girl Scout in America. Plus, if you come over here, and you see this, that we have in our archives, that is the first receipt for Girl Scout cookies. That's right. That's the first receipt for Girl Scout cookies. There was a contest, and who won the contest? Gottlieb's Kosher Bakery. The Gottlieb family is still in our community. They're at the Orthodox synagogue, but they won with either oatmeal raisin, oatmeal chocolate chip. I always forget which one it was. They won and became the first bakery to serve Girl Scout cookies. Today, Girl Scout cookies are kosher. Back then, they were too. Through the years, the community would grow, and we would end up with 3 synagogues today. In the 1860s, a synagogue would break off from our synagogue and become BBJ, B'nai B'rith Jacob. Both synagogues were Orthodox, by the way. We didn't become Reformed till 1904. We're the oldest synagogue that is Reform in the country, but in Charleston, their synagogue became Reform in the 1840s, much earlier than us. We're just an older synagogue overall. Over here we have a tri-faith service, something we do every year, and our biggest event is our food festival, in which some years we get 10,000 people come to Savannah for Jewish food. We have 250, 300 people volunteer. It's a big community event. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again soon. And here's an exhibition of things that are going on in our community, because not only are we a museum, but we're a thriving community that has been growing. We've probably added 130 families or so in the last 8 to 9 years, so we're a growing family. Does anybody have any questions, by the way? I'm going to stop twice. This is the first time, and I'm going to stop again when we get to our beautiful sanctuary. I'm going to come over here, though, so you can see me a little better. Anybody? Oh, that's much easier. Anybody have any questions?
And I'm going to ask if folks have questions. There are a couple of questions in the chat box, which I'll read out loud now. And in the meantime, if you have a question, if you want to use the virtual raise hand button, you can try waving, but there are a bunch of screens of people and I probably won't see you. But that way, if you can find the virtual hand and then we can unmute you, or you could put your question in the chat box, whichever is easier.
And I don't have access to the chat box, so.
I can read them to you. Does that work?
Perfect.
Okay, so the first question I think you may have addressed. It is about the synagogue in Charleston, and if you could compare the two. But I think you spoke about that, correct?
A little bit. KKVE is the synagogue in Charleston. Charleston actually there were Jews living there before here, but we founded our synagogue before theirs. The first synagogue in America is in New York, Mickve Israel. The second was Truro, Rhode Island. We're third. Then Philadelphia, which is also Mickve Israel. Then Charleston. And those were the 5 synagogues before the American Revolution. Then Richmond founded their synagogue after the Revolution, but before Washington became president. So there are 6 continental congregations. Charleston many people don't realize, and I will take away from them because I talked to them, hopefully they'll be able to do this as well. When those Jews left Savannah in 1742 because of the war, Charleston became the largest Jewish city in America, but whereas we held that title for maybe 5 years, they held the title for maybe 100 years. So there were, Charleston was the biggest Jewish community in America, and I'm guessing till the 1840s, and that's a guess, and we'll know more later when we speak with them.
Great. What happened to the Sephardi Jews who ran away in 1742? Where did they go?
They went to a variety of places, Richmond, but a lot of them went to Philadelphia and helped found Mickve Israel in Philadelphia. We're not the first Mickve Israel, by the way, in the New World. We're the first one in America, but there was one in the Caribbean years before us. So that one was first, we'd be the second. The third was in Philadelphia. Why it was a popular name? Obviously, it's the hope of Israel, so that probably is. But there's a wide range of ways and reasons that different names become more popular, but that was the most popular one. Certainly we were to have 3 Mickve Israels by 1745 was pretty impressive.
Can you address the issue of slavery in the Jewish community?
Yeah, and that's a question we get a lot of, obviously. Now, what we have to remember is Jews generally live the same lives of people in their communities. So were there Jewish slave owners? There were, definitely. Was it the majority? It was not, but we certainly had them here. And it's not something we're proud of, but it's not something we hide either. So we want to make sure people recognize that it was something we did that we shouldn't have done. There are a lot of myths out there that Jews ran the slave trade and the majority of Jews were the ones who owned slaves. That, of course, is by far a myth. It was a very small percentage, obviously, because we were a very small percentage of the population. But I will also add, during the Civil Rights Movement, as we know, Jews were very involved in the Civil Rights Movement. In southern towns like Savannah, the Jews who lived here had a lot to fear if they became too overtly supportive of the Civil Rights Movement. Obviously, they could kill you or burn your house down, although that really generally did not happen because generally Jews have been treated very well in the South. But what you'll see in the Jews in this area, a lot of them were merchants, and they were the first ones to offer African-American jobs, the first ones to give them better jobs, to let them run the store, to let them run the cash register. So we've had a very good relationship here in Savannah. Unfortunately, we're in the South, so all these terrible things happened here, but a lot of the Jews were a lot of the first in Savannah would have been because of Jews.
Can you explain to people the meaning of the name of the synagogue and how it got its name?
Yeah, the meaning is the Mickve Israel. Some people think mikveh like the ritual bath. No, it's a reference from the Bible. It just means the hope of Israel, basically, is the translation. So it's, the original was Kilat, the community, Mickve Israel, hope of Israel, which is really interesting because I was just asked to give a speech during a COVID memorial, and they asked me to speak about hope. So obviously, hope is in the name of our congregation.
Beautiful. KKBE, is that the synagogue in Charleston?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they say they're the oldest in continuous use. So during what period was this one closed?
Well, let me get my boxing gloves out for that one. So they say the oldest in continuous use. That is a point of contention because we could say the same thing. We believe we are the one in continuous use. The reason they would say that is because Savannah was taken during the American Revolution, and a lot of the Jews left, but not all of them. So we don't know for sure if they were having services during that time, but they certainly could have. So we would have been considered in continuous use the whole time. So that is a debate between Charleston and us. What we're going to probably do about it is some sort of MMA fighting with me and the rabbi, or some sort of boxing thing, or maybe, chess.
Could you invite us on Zoom for that experience?
Oh yeah, but we're going to be charging for that one. Because quite frankly, if I'm going to get in a ring and get injured that badly, I want to get paid.
All right, Rabbi Haas, I think you can continue with the tour, and we'll have more opportunity for questions later. Okay,
great. Right here we have a series of dates for our community, including some pictures, including a picture with our Rabbi Emeritus, with President Ford, who gathered all of the rabbis of the 6 continental congregations. Right now, I think KKBE and us are the only 2 of those original congregations. that are Ashkenazic today. I think the other 4 are still Sephardic. We have here a replica of the boat. And a lot of people make the mistake thinking that as we have grown, today the average height for a person is much bigger than they were 200 years ago, but that wasn't the actual boat they came over on. That's just a facsimile. We weren't that short back then. We did have a fire in 1927, and we'll talk about that in a bit when we go to the sanctuary. And before we go in there, we have a minute book, which is one of those things that's really quite impressive for anybody who likes to do research, because we have minute books going all the way back. This one is from 1790 to 1851. And we have the seal of incorporation into the United States of America as a congregation in November of 1790. The Sheftel family in Savannah actually has the document of incorporation into the British Empire from King George II. So that's another piece of our history. We come over here, we see we have more presidential letters than any congregation. We know we've had more than this. Some of them have slipped out of here through the years, but we're very, very proud to have had so many so far. And we've gotten them for various reasons through the years. Now we're going to go into our beautiful sanctuary. Although we are the 3rd oldest synagogue, our sanctuary is actually the 10th oldest sanctuary building. KKB, which we talked about, I believe the 2nd, but first by far the oldest is Turo, which I believe is 100 years older, their building, than any other building that's been in use. Although Turo ceased to be a synagogue for many years, and New York Sheriff Israel was the caretaker, so they weren't there, but that building has been around, I think, early 18th century. So a lot of people think Turo is the first congregation in America. They're not, they're the 2nd. They just have the oldest building. If we come in here, we take great pride in our sanctuary, which today, of course, is more of a movie studio than a sanctuary, but hopefully we'll get back to having live services. Right now, we do a virtual recorded service on Saturday morning because it was just too hard to do a live service and do it the way we wanted. And then we do a Zoom live service on Friday night. This is the last neo-Gothic synagogue left in America. There's another one we know of in Prague. There are probably others. There were many of them, but we're the last one. We stayed in this building because we became a historic congregation. In 1878, we completed this building, which is neo-Gothic. So a lot of people think it is originally a church because it's in a cross. If you look from Google Earth, it's a cross, which is really strange. A lot of people can't imagine why we did that. The truth is, several synagogues did do the exact same thing. It's just they've moved on. You have to remember, the tradition for synagogues in terms of architecture is there is no tradition. There's no rules to how you build a synagogue. You put an ark facing the Israel, but that's really it with the light. So you generally build it the same way everybody else was building it. Right next to us, although that building has been torn down, First Presbyterian, they built a building neo-Gothic style in 1872. In 1874, the cathedral, the Catholic diocese, built their neo-Gothic building. And then in 1878, using the same architect, we built ours. So we are the last one in existence, but we weren't the only one. And I think your finger is right on the thing there.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. So the acoustics are in here amazing. It's a beautiful sanctuary. The pews are original. The chairs are original. The windows, stained glass, were added through the years. There are 3 stained glass windows that were put in at the beginning. And you can see those up there. And those were put in for a total price of $500. We believe they were the last windows from a very famous company to be installed. It has the priestly symbol of the split hand. So whenever anybody asks me and says, what does that have to do with Star Trek? I have to explain to them that all Jews are Star Trek fans. I mean, because I want to make sure to teach Judaism to the rest of the world. So if you look around here, you'll see it is beautiful. It has wonderful acoustics. We have an organ up there. Again, our original organ burnt in a fire in 1927, so that one is from a few years later. Most of everything else is original. We were actually the first congregation in America to play an organ, to use it. We know for sure we used it in 1820 when we inaugurated our first building. We probably used one earlier, but we can't prove that, and so which was founded late in the, I think it's 1904, I believe. So when that synagogue was founded as a conservative synagogue, we became the Reformed synagogue, and BBJ became the Orthodox synagogue, which is really great because, of course, you have a lot of options here now if you come. Now, are there any questions about the sanctuary or rituals or anything else that we do here in the South?
There are. Well, two questions that are kind of related. The first question is, did there used to be a different layout that had a women's section?
That is an excellent question. Now we have to take ourselves back to the 18th and 19th century. America's still a little bit of the Wild West, and we have to also remember Orthodoxy, Reform movement, conservative didn't exist yet, were very different. So we were an Orthodox synagogue in the 1860s when a touring rabbi came and talked about the need to put people together and not have divided seating anymore. So as an Orthodox synagogue, we decided to stop with the mechitza in the 1860s and stay an Orthodox synagogue. These days, we probably would have gone conservative, but back then the conservative movement didn't exist. So we basically became the more liberal Orthodox synagogue. And so by the time we built this building in 1878, we had already stopped using mechitza for about, so we did not put one in. We do have a place up there, but that was for the choir. That was never for the women.
Very interesting. And what about the organ? Was that original to the Orthodox congregation?
You have to also take us back. I mean, in the modern world, we are very proud to be Americans and Jews, and it does not make me nervous if I'm going to be very Orthodox to walk down the street that somebody's going to hate me or somebody's not going to give me a job. So back in the 19th and 18th century, we needed to fit in. So even if you were Orthodox, and Mordechai Sheftel, by the way, the man I talked about, was probably the most Orthodox man in the country because he was very religious, as was his father. So playing organ music was considered what everybody else was doing. And if we wanted Christians to come into our building or walk by and see us praying, we wanted to look as much like them. Plus, if you go back several thousand years, originally we did use musical instruments on Shabbat. It's only later in time that we stopped doing that. So yes, we started playing the organ, and we were an Orthodox synagogue using the organ for almost 100 years. We were an Orthodox synagogue for probably 40 years with mixed seating. And so as time has gone on, and we feel very comfortable in our skin now, and I feel very comfortable being a Reform rabbi, I'd be very comfortable being conservative, I'd be very comfortable being Orthodox, but back then we really wanted to fit in a little bit more, and so we were a little leery about being so different. Like even Orthodox people in the 19th century and 18th century might not have been wearing yarmulkes all the time. They would probably be wearing hats maybe, but they probably wouldn't have been wearing yarmulkes necessarily.
Interesting. Do you have a mikveh?
We do not have a mikveh ourselves, but we do have a community mikveh. It is at a house that is next to the Orthodox synagogue. And so we use it obviously for conversion. Some people use it for weddings. And we are very fortunate to live in a place where all three synagogues get along very well. We do a lot with the conservative synagogue, Agudat Achim. In fact, we have a joint religious school. And we have very good relations with the Orthodox synagogue. We do a little less with them. Obviously, they have some restrictions that we don't have, but we get along with them very well. I go there all the time for different events. Well, I did before COVID-19. And so we're very blessed to be in a place that people get along pretty well.
And along those lines, what is the total Jewish population in Savannah, and what would you say is the breakdown in terms of the denominations?
The population of Savannah is a guesstimate 4,500 to 5,000. However, just north of us in South Carolina, there is a place called Bluffton and Hilton Head and a big Sun City retirement place. So there's a lot of Jews that are not in Georgia, but just north of us by a little bit, probably over 1,000, maybe more. So there could be 6,000 Jews maybe in the whole area, 4,500, 5,000 in Georgia. What's interesting is we are by far the second largest Jewish community in all of Georgia. There's nobody, and third is way behind us. However, number one is Atlanta, which has like 150,000 Jews. So most of the Jews in Georgia are in Atlanta, and then we've got 4,500, 5,000 here, and then there's a smattering, some in Macon and Augusta. So we're proud of the number of Jews. As for the numbers of the synagogues, really interesting to note, probably we think, and we don't have the numbers, the Orthodox synagogue may be the biggest. They've had a very strong Orthodox community here for a very long time. They have a lot of young educators who moved from New York and a wonderful group of people for their kollel. So we're probably around 410 families. I'd say the conservative, and don't quote me, I'd say maybe 280 families, and the Orthodox synagogue, maybe 500 families, and those other two are complete guesses, by the way. What's really great about Savannah is a lot of people, again, think of us as a museum in terms of our synagogue, which we are, we're a full-time museum. However, we've probably added somewhere in around 130 families overall in the last 8 to 10 years. So not just added them, I mean, including people who have left or have died, we're probably up 130 families. And Savannah is a beautiful place to live. I think it's it's gotten out that Savannah is a wonderful place. So we have a lot of people who've been moving here.
Was there any damage during the Civil War?
Very good question. Interestingly enough, it seems like one city or another misses a war. We were taken during the Revolution, and the city was not completely razed, but very damaged. So there are very few, there's a few homes here and there that survived, but really very little. However, the story goes, after Sherman had decimated everywhere, including Atlanta and Charleston, he got to Savannah and did not do any damage to the city. He sent a note to Lincoln giving it to him as a Christmas present. So they did not damage the city. They actually used it and stayed here for a long time. The men, got a little crazy in doing things with the cemeteries and creating that kind of damage, but the city itself survived almost completely intact.
And we'll take one more question at this point. What is the meaning of the stained glass? What are the images?
Well, again, the stained glass have been added through the years, and there's a wide range of images. Because we were also an Orthodox synagogue, you will not see any human beings or God shown on it. We have the ark, we have a crown, we have a menorah, we have a wide range of other symbols, including fauna, we have a lion. So it's a lot of the various images of Judaism that are placed on them. Almost every window was developed for a particular reason. The window you're looking at now is actually the only window we don't know exactly when it was put there or why it was put there, but all the other ones, we have a history of each as we keep. Now, I could actually probably make up histories for every single window, but we do have the records of those. I just don't have all of that on me right now. But they're really stunningly beautiful. Our sanctuary is often listed on as one of the most beautiful sanctuaries in the world. So it's really quite proud to be on that list. And what's interestingly enough about the sanctuary is the dedication. No community has ever been more dedicated than our community in building this sanctuary. What do I mean? We built this, started in, I think, 1876 in the middle of a yellow fever epidemic that was devastating Savannah. Again, this was built originally on swampland. The whole city is a swamp. And so almost everybody left. The president of the chairman of the committee to build the synagogue stayed here and died of yellow fever. Then the next chairman stayed here and died of yellow fever. And then the next chairman stayed here and died of yellow fever. It was the fourth chairman of the committee that survived and was able to be here when it actually was finished. And I talk to our presidents all the time. They never show that kind of dedication anymore in our congregation. So again, the first three heads of the committee died. Their families survived as they each had sent their families out of town, but it really was quite impressive.
Will you have one more stop for questions?
Sure. I think we're finishing up now.
Okay, great. So there are a few more if you're willing. Where else in the world is there a Gothic synagogue?
Well, the neo-Gothic kind of a neo-Gothic one, there's one in Prague. So a lot of people have been there. It is, I think, the new synagogue or the new old synagogue. Generally speaking, it would be a synagogue built around the same time, and there's a beautiful synagogue. It's still in use. If you've been there and you go in, you will notice the difference. They do have a second level. I think it's the old new synagogue is what it's called, or maybe just the new synagogue. It's beautiful, stunningly beautiful as well. There's probably other smaller ones and way places we don't know of, but that's the only ones we have confirmed. Also, what's interesting to note is in our ark, we have 6 Torah scrolls. We commissioned one about 6 years ago. So when that scroll was finished, we became the synagogue with the oldest and newest Torah scrolls in America for that very short period. And so that was a little interesting note in our history.
Also, about a specific Torah in the Ark. The Slaney Torah?
Yes. So what a lot of people probably know because they have it in their sanctuary is after World War II, an organization in England, Westminster Synagogue, collected, I think, 1,800 Torah scrolls that had survived the war and sent them out. I think 1,500 of them were sent out to communities around the world as caretakers. And so your responsibility was to kosher the scroll. And if a congregation ever was founded in the city from where the scroll came from, you would give them the scroll. In the 1960s, we were given a scroll from Slaney, which was in Czechoslovakia, now is in the Czech Republic. It's about 45 minutes or an hour outside of Prague. So we were given a scroll from there, and it's a very interesting coincidence, and we have an exhibition downstairs if we can go down there if you'd like. Many people don't realize the mighty 8th Air Force, that is the Air Force that won World War II, or not won World War II, was one of the main reasons we won World War II, was founded in Savannah. So imagine that, the Air Force, the greatest Air Force in the history of humankind that was put in use during a war, was founded here. Obviously, it wasn't founded to be that big. It became so when we went into World War II. So during World War II, a bomber was shot down in Slaney. And all of the men were killed except for one. The city, after the war, was so thankful to the Americans for saving their city that they took the plane, the leftovers of the plane, and they made it into a monument. And so if you go to Slaney, which is not a tourist destination, you can see this memorial. So we just thought it was very interesting that there was a memorial to the mighty 8th in Slaney when we have a Torah from Slaney and we're in the city where the mighty 8th was found. And not only that, the mighty 8th was founded right across this park from us, like a 10-minute walk. And now it's an American Legion. So so we have a nice little kind of a, what do we call it? Nice little connection to Slaney.
And someone wants to know where you're from.
I'm from one of the centers of Jewish learning, McAllen, Texas, which is right on the border, the southern tip of Texas, one step above Mexico. Many people may have heard of South Padre Island. I'm from McAllen. And so I have been here now for 8.5 years. So I'm from the actual legitimate South, because geographically, unless you're living below Miami in Florida, you can't get much more south than where I'm from.
Someone's asking about your membership and the diversity of the congregation, if there are LGBT members, very different diversity in your membership.
That is an excellent question, and I should have mentioned that already. What's wonderful about our congregation, you have to understand we're in the South. And so a lot of congregations, especially Reformed Jewish congregations in the Northeast, California, you're talking your population is probably 99% politically Democrat. But we're in the South, so we happen to have people on both sides. We have staunch Republicans and staunch Democrats in our congregation, and we get along very well. However, what's so interesting is socially, everybody is very liberal. Our congregation is very supportive of everyone, whether it's gay rights, transgender rights, Jews of color, Jews from the north or from here. We have some Jews who are from Savannah, some Jews whose family go back to the early 19th century, a few go back to the early 18th century. And of course, we have a lot of Jews who moved here after the Russian immigration. We have a lot of Jews who moved here in the last 25 years who retired and moved to Savannah. And so we have this wide range of gamut. You could be standing next to somebody who moved here a year ago and his whole family has always lived in New York, and your family came over on the boat in 1733, and your friends are getting along and having a great time. We try to keep the politics out of it because we don't, show favoritism to any party. But when it comes to social issues, we're very liberal and very welcoming.
We have a social action committee that's for LGBTQ.
We also have a social action committee that is just for LGBTQ.
And we go to Pride.
And we just
have a table
well, when they
Pride.
have the Pride Parade, we participate.
Yeah. And,
Thanks, Jill. For anyone who missed the beginning, that's Jill behind the phone, the camera.
Yeah.
Again, it's hard to remember all the things we do because obviously we didn't do them last year because we closed down. But this synagogue is kind of the interfaith center for Savannah because we're so well known, because Savannah is a tourist destination, but because also it's an ecumenical hub and we get along very well here. So we do a lot of work, and even more so in recent days, between a wide range of houses of worship. One of the best things about Savannah, and I'll tell you this personally, is we get along with everyone. We do a lot of work with a lot of houses of worship, maybe 100 or more overall with different organizations. However, there are some places that don't want to work with Jews or don't want to work with somebody who's LGBT friendly or don't want to work with this. However, we don't have screaming and yelling and people getting upset at each other. If they don't want to work with us, to just say, sorry, we just don't want to do that, no worries, and that's it. So we get along very well, which is really nice. And if you want to do something together, great. If you don't, we say, I'm sorry, we'd love to, but we can't, and that's it. And it's really nice to be living in an area that everyone gets along so well.
Okay, great. And we'll close up with just one last question, which is, if people are interested in viewing your services, do you live stream that in a public way?
We do. We have a YouTube page. And so everything we do on Zoom goes onto the page, everything, and then we live stream it from Zoom on Friday night. We record it on Saturday. We would love to live stream it on Saturday. We started doing that. It's just because we add so many pieces of music into it that are recorded and we invite so many members to participate, we couldn't live stream it and then do all the things. We didn't have the capability, so that's why we have to record it. But our YouTube page, wonderful. We have a lot of different things. We have all of our teaching things are on there. We just participated in the vigil for the city for COVID-19. And for our high holidays, we worked really hard for our high holiday services, and we had thousands of people from around the world. I think our Colonial Jewish service had 7,000 views.
I have 14,000.
14,000, 14,000, Jill's telling me. So it's difficult to live in the COVID-19 world, but there are some pluses, and one of them is you can view services everywhere because everybody's putting them online now. Even the houses of worship, and we have a Savannah Faith is the community the mayor has helped to set up where all the houses of worship talk to each other. Some houses of worship are going back and are doing in-person services, but they're all doing the mass, the separating, all having make sure people wash their hands. So it's really been a wonderful way for us to work together. Unfortunately, all the difficulties that COVID has brought, but at least we're working together as a city.
And it's youtube.com/Mickve Israel Savannah.
But youtube.com/Mickve Israel Savannah. We have a lot of different things on there. We do a lot of education courses. We do interview podcasts. And so everyone's welcome. We also have a tour of our sanctuary and museum in there as well. So, and if anybody has any questions or ever wants to come in here, just give us a call. We'd love to show you around.